advantage for white, but black has at his disposal a harassing check, where even though he doesn't take one of the white rooks, and indeed only equalizes the piece count, I believe, knight e7 takes c6, takes d4 to cover the second rank, bishop c2 takes b1. Oh, well, okay, black will end this series up 4-3, so he hasn't ignored material, but he has left white with two rooks. Bishop c2 takes b1, and now black plays bishop b4 check. And again, we see that these three pieces cannot be ignored. Even if white were to take some of these pieces, it's just difficult. He can't ignore the bishop because it supports too much material, or because it's already developed, can quickly eat things like the h1 rook. So in fact, it looks like white is lost here. I'm not 100% sure that he's lost. But in all the series that I analyzed, I could not find a defense for white. In the game, he tried king d1, knight f3, knight takes d4, rook takes b1, e takes d5, d6, d takes c7 check. But it's rather obvious that this is going to get checkmated on the back rank to a pattern I mentioned earlier. f5, f4, f3, f takes g2, rook f8, rook takes f2, and g takes h1 queen. And this is a very common mating pattern. When the king stays on the back rank, you checkmate with a queen and just cover the second rank with a rook. Rewinding that and going back and looking at some better tries on the 7. If white plays something like king f1, rook takes b1, rook d1, rook takes d4, rook takes b4, e takes d5, king e2, then black can still win. Having a rook on the 8 is very powerful. g5, g4, g3, g takes h2, h takes g1 queen, queen takes h1, queen h4, queen takes b4. And white doesn't really have any solution here, even if he were to queen on the back rank, that would just deliver check. Black, he has no way to cover d7 is his main problem. Or rather, he has no way to cover both d7 and e7 in 9 moves. It's going to take 5 just to promote, and then he can't cover both. He would need to get a king to c6 and a pawn to d6, and that takes too many moves. So he could try promoting to a knight, or a bishop, perhaps 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But the problem then is that black's just free to promote his h-pawn. So this appears to win for black. Going back to the 7 again, another possibility is if white tried this series, king d1, knight f3, knight takes d4, rook takes b1, a3, a takes b4. Again, eating all the pieces except for the rook on h8, knight e2. But then it turns out black has a nice win in 8. If you want to try to solve it, you're welcome to pause the video. I'm going to go ahead and show it now. D takes e4, e3, e takes f2, rook e8, rook takes e2, king e7, king f6, f1 queen, and we see that this is an excellent example of a near mate ghost, and this should have been familiar to you as a concept from a previous video on ghosts. So it looks like, near as I can tell, black was actually winning that game. This next example, I'll let you try to find the harassing check. I'll give a hint that it's a pattern that I've previously shown. And this is a Fischer Random game I played in the Fischer Random Championship against Fabio Forzoni. e4, e5, b5, b4, f4, f takes e5, f6, f takes e5, knight h6, rook takes f1 check, king takes f1, bishop takes e5, bishop takes g7, bishop takes h8, king f2, and now black attempted a harassing check of his own. Bishop takes e4, bishop takes g2, bishop takes h1, d5, king d7, bishop h4 check. And at first glance it looks like white might be in some trouble, although if we remember that the piece count is only the same here, 5 to 5, we realize that white should be doing well here. Even though this looks scary, he should be able to eat some of this material. And it turns out he has an extremely harassing check, so if you want to try to solve this, you can pause the video. 7 moves. Okay, so first thing is that king e3 looks like it's a bad square for the king, but it turns out it's actually not. That he's not getting checkmated there, and then he's free to play this pattern that I mentioned earlier: knight f3, knight takes h4, knight f5, knight d6, knight takes c8, and finally bishop g4 check. You'll remember this pattern from the Galvin Honkala game that I showed earlier in this video. And the key here is that the king on e3 is, if knight takes g4 is played right away, then that delivers check and ends the series. So although we know that black will probably end his series with knight takes g4, he'll have to wait until the end to do that. So in the meantime, he will have to move his king here. He can't go to e7, and he pretty much has to go to a really bad square, either the back rank where he's easily mated by anything, or to c6. He gambled that he would be able to survive on c6 in the game, and he played what looks at first glance to be a powerful series, promoting the a pawn. B takes a2, a takes b1, queen. Queen takes c1, and then knight takes g4 check. And white is reduced to no promotable pawns and a mere 2 minor pieces. Well, okay, he could actually theoretically promote, but it would be very slow to promote the h pawn. But it turns out that he doesn't need this idea, and he can in fact checkmate in only 7 moves of his 9, so he doesn't even need 8 or 9 moves to deliver checkmate. The king is in such a box. And I found this checkmate: king f4, king f5, king e6, bishop d4, this covers the key squares of c5 and b6, knight d6, this covers b7, and now all we have to do is find a way to deliver check, and it's easy to do that with c4, c takes b5, and black is in checkmate. For a final example on a harassing check, this one is useful because it's also a example of dangling pawn disruption, so it illustrates 2 of the themes that we've talked about in this video. This is a game from 1998 between Rolf Sicker of Germany and Gregor Bombeck. And Bombeck is black. e4, d5, e5. The series probably loses, but at the time we thought that it might be okay for black. Queen g4, queen c8, queen d8, king d8, d takes e4, bishop b4, knight e7. Again, black is behind in material, but we thought that at the time that perhaps his incredibly accelerated development would make up for it, but it doesn't appear to, and it seems like bishop a6, b7, a8, king e2, takes e4, bishop a6, b7, e4, a8, and king e2 appears to win even with pawn promotions of the e-pawn and the bishop able to do large munches. It just doesn't look like black can catch up enough in material or disrupt enough. But at any rate, the series white played here is not the best. b3, bishop a3, bishop takes b4. This essentially plays into black's hands by taking the apparently dangerous bishop on b4, but it turns out he didn't need to. Bishop takes e7 check. Now we see an example of dangling pawn disruption and a harassing check all in one. So king takes e7, a5, a4, a takes b3, rook takes a2, rook takes a1 check. Not only is this kind of a harassing check because white has to go to e2, where he would be ghosted because he's in front of his bishop, so he'll have to spend more moves moving his bishop or moving his king again. But in addition, we see that the b3 pawn might as well be a queen. It obviously has to be captured, and even though it's relatively easily captured in one move, the combination of having to spin 1 move to get out of check, 1 move to deal with the ghost threat, 1 move to capture the pawn, well, that's 3 moves out of 7 that black has managed to neutralize with this extremely effective 6. So it's no surprise that white quickly finds himself in a lot of trouble. So he played this series: king e2, g3, bishop e2, bishop takes e4, knight f3, c takes b3, rook takes a1. And he has ended up 4-2 in the piece count, but his pieces are not well placed. If they were all on the back rank, he might, have a shot here. But the problem is that it's relatively easy to capture them en route, as it were. So black has a very strong harassing check here. If you want to try to solve it, there might be other series that win, but this one is definitely the cleanest. Okay, so first thing you notice is that f5, for EF3 is extremely effective. That takes 2 pieces and only 3 moves. The pieces were nicely lined up for that. But this one is a little harder to spot, which is to play knight d7. This configuration with the king defending the knight defends it from, even if he promoted to a queen, he couldn't take this knight without delivering check. Rook a8, rook takes a1, rook c1, rook takes c3, e takes f3 check. This is extremely disruptive because the rook guards this whole rank and guards the pawn. So white now has to pretty much walk his king into a box onto the back rank. And even though he can take both the rook and the knight, black has promotable pawns on both sides of the board, and wherever the king goes, he can't stop all of those promotable pawns. So this is clearly lost for white. In the game, he played king d1, d4, d takes e5, e6, e takes d7, d8 rook, because becoming a queen would deliver check early and end the series. Rook d3, rook takes c3, rook takes f3, and this was a clever try. Because black can't make a queen unless he's checkmating. Making a queen would be a bad idea because it would deliver check, and then white would just move and he would eat the rook. And notice if black were to play g5, g4, gf, well, then he doesn't have enough moves left. If he just made a queen over here, well, then white would make a queen over here and he would win. But one of the common things you readily realize is that you can often win by just under-promoting, and once you recognize that possibility, the wins become pretty trivial. So h5, h4, h takes g3, g takes f2, f1 knight, knight takes h2, knight takes f3, knight d4, knight takes b3, 10 moves is a lot, as you'll notice, and king f7, and white is completely helpless with the lone king. He could draw this. Could he somehow find a way to eat all the knight and both of these pawns? But the problem is the king on f7 covers the e6 square. There's no way for white to come in and eat these 2 pawns. So in fact, black will have all 3 of his pawns on the 12 and easily deliver checkmate as the game goes on. So I'm going to talk very quickly about offensive swarms that work. When I do the next video, which is on defense, I'm going to talk about defending against the swarm. So I'm just going to show one quick example of a swarm that works. Most swarms, remember, I have said already, fail because they ignore the material race, but it's still very hard to defend against them and try to find a series that doesn't get. I will say that when swarms do work, they're very, very cool. This is the game Hyatt Cassano from the Fisher Random Chess Championship 1998. B4, B5, E5. You'll notice here that the kings are in a really kind of a terrible position here. It's very hard to avoid checkmate. The rook's next to the king is just really, really a bad configuration. And this series, G5, G4, King G7. Oh, sorry, that should be a king. King G7. H6 avoids checkmate, but doesn't do much else. And in fact, white has an extremely powerful swarm here. Knight C3, Knight D5. Rook f4, king f2, rook takes g4 check, and I'm pretty sure if you could somehow get a computer that could analyze 13 moves ahead and see black 6 and white 7, that black has no moves at all to avoid checkmate on the 7. At least I couldn't find anything for him here. It just seems like he is in a complete box. So this is a swarm, it's a harassing check, and this is a case where even though white ignored material, and didn't need anything, it doesn't really seem like black has any at all. And in the game you went king h7, queen a6, queen a3, queen c1, queen takes d1, queen takes g4, but this got mated rather simply by knight e7, bishop takes e5, h3, h takes g4, knight f3, and knight g5 checkmate. In fact, there were several checkmates here, but I chose to play this one because every single white piece is participating in the checkmate, and I found that very aesthetically pleasing. So this is a rare example of a swarm that actually works, mainly because of the Fisher random position just being really awful for kind of both sides, in terms of king safety. I don't think very many swarms work at all in the starting position of chess. So this video hopefully gave you some idea of how one side can use disruptive techniques in addition to just taking material to create a powerful series. So I hope you enjoy it, and I'll talk about defense in my next video.